Our first movie tells the story of a friendship behind prison walls that spans more than 20 years.
Welcome to episode 6 of Middlebrow-madness, a podcast of cinematic hubris, or I swear I'll get it right one of these days. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
It's you said both that and podcast hubris, so I'm not sure which one you want to live with.
Because it's an exercise in podcast hubris as well. Because I think that's what episode 0 was, an exercise in podcast hubris. I want to be consistent, Michelle.
You're already fucked up because the first 3 episodes you've said different things, so you can't be consistent. We've passed that bridge. That's not how the expression goes.
We've crossed that bridge, now we're here.
We burned that bridge, and now, what's up, gamers? I'm Michelle Larf.
I'm Derek Gaudin.
And today we're talking about movies. Like them, love them. What do we think of them?
I'm sorry. That made me laugh.
Okay. I'm glad I could do that for you, Derek.
Oh, man. Yeah, the gimmick of the pod, if Michelle's explanation didn't already make that clear, is that we watch movies on this show. Specifically, we watch movies on the IMDb Top 250 Films of All Time list. We add 6 of our wild cards, and we make a big old bracket out of it. And through the tried, tested, and true method of single elimination, we will eventually, after maybe 3-ish years, get to the best movie of this particular list. And according to IMDb, the greatest movie of all time, asterisk.
Unless we end up choosing one of the movies we added in which case, all bets are off.
Man, wouldn't that be super anticlimactic? Is that we do this whole thing about the Internet Movie Database, and then it ends up that Boogie Nights is the best movie of all time?
So we're like, hey, guess what? We really like Boogie Nights, so fuck the IMDb.
Oh, man. But Boogie Nights is not...
Boogie Nights should be on the 250. Sorry,
it should be on the 250.
IMDb. Boogie Nights is a fucking good movie.
Shout out to Ross, who was equally... Ross Burks, who was equally as aghast that Boogie Nights was not on this list as we were when we first put this in.
But we got 4 very different movies today.
Yeah, and 4 movies that range from pretty good to bona fide masterpiece.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. And also, I think it's really cool, 4 movies from different countries.
You're right. A little trip around the world with Middlebrow Madness. So our first our matchups are The Hunt versus The General, and Spirited Away versus A Wednesday. So let's get right to it. Representing Denmark today, The Hunt. The 102 seed in our tournament, so just outside the top 100, released in 2012, directed by Thomas Vinterberg, nominated for the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film, winner of the Best Actor prize at the Cannes Film Festival for Mads Mikkelsen, and pretty decently, a modest hit, $3.5 million budget, and $18.3 million box office if my adjustments and price dollar conversions are correct. And it's
definitely more money than I would expect for a movie of this subject.
There's something in the water in Europe, and I'm not sure what it is, but but it's going up against The General. This is the second episode that we contend with one Buster Keaton. This was released in 1926. It was directed by Mr. Keaton and Clyde Bruckman. And if my calculations are correct, it was made for $10.7 million, or the equivalent thereof in the 20s, and made $14.3 million at the box office, and is part of the, as coined in the last episode, Buster Keaton God Run in the 1920s. So The Hunt, Michelle.
The Hunt. This is a film, I remember when this came out in 2012, everyone was talking about it, and everyone was like, you really need to see The Hunt. I didn't get around to it, so I watched it, I think it was yesterday. This is a rough movie.
It is really squirm-inducing.
This is, so, like I said, it's a movie that made $18.3 million, and it's about a kindergarten teacher being falsely accused of child molestation, and the entire town basically turning on him.
Yeah, in frightening ways.
Yes.
Not just like your garden variety shunning. Shit happens. The fact that Thomas Vinterberg, who you might know as the director of The Celebration or Festen, which was one of the
first Dogma film, right?
The first Dogma film, 98, I believe, which is a great movie. this kind of plays like the inverse of it. It's like the other side of that coin. It's still in that same wheelhouse and mood, but plays it a bit differently. And I think the thing that makes the film beyond the this film almost looks impossibly idyllic, and it's lit just so. It's very tasteful. But what makes it Mads goddamn motherfucking Mikkelsen, because he looks like such a heel. You know him as Le Chiffre. You know him as Hannibal. Of course, this dude isn't doing bad shit, but he's playing the figurative wrong guy in this film. He's the wrong man.
Yeah, it's such a tightrope he has to walk, because on the one hand, he is still kind of imposing and weird looking and kind of creepy. Like just Mads Mikkelsen is inherently a little bit creepy looking. And
it's those Danish cheekbones, man.
And I think the reason, just to like cut right to it, the reason this movie works for me is because you at once feel sorry for him, and you feel so frustrated that you know what's happening to him isn't the truth, and you know he's being falsely accused. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you really understand what the town feels.
Yeah.
Like I told you before we started that Thomas Bo Larsen, who plays Theo, which is Lucas's best friend, who
also in Festen,
his daughter is who originally
Clara
makes the almost accusation. It's not quite. It's very similar to the Satanic Panic of the 80s, which is, for those who don't know, in America, there was a whole thing in the 80s where satanic ritual abuse was this thing that everyone thought was happening everywhere. And it was these Satanists across the country, usually school teachers, who were said to have molested and like seriously abused like so many children. And it turns out almost all of it was mass hysteria and panic, and none of it actually happened, because if you ask the right leading questions to a kid because they want to like make you happy, because they want to answer your questions, they will basically tell you whatever you want, and then they'll falsely remember things that didn't actually happen. There's actually a really good documentary called Capturing the Freedmans.
I heard of that.
It's a very good documentary that's actually pretty... the director ended up saying that he believes that the people involved didn't do the thing, although I think the movie admirably is in the middle, where it's saying some of the stuff's clearly not true, but some of the stuff is really weird, and it seems like there might be something here anyways. But this movie is, by having such a strong character in Theo, by having such a strong character in Nadja, who's Lucas's girlfriend, or in all these other characters, it makes it so that you say, hey, I have the information to know that what's happening is incorrect and that he's being wrongly accused. But I don't know if I'd be able to have that kind of rationality if it was, for example, my daughter who was the one who theoretically was abused in this way.
Sure. Like, just going back to like that basically interrogation sequence at the beginning when they're first talking to Clara about what in giant quotation marks might have happened. It is the first taste in the film. Your heart sinks just immediately and stays there for an hour and a half.
Yeah. And it's so wonderfully controlled. In that there's, especially one thing I thought was really clever and works so well, is that it takes a very, like, obviously, Mads Mikkelsen is denying it, but he never says the words, I didn't do anything. He never says those words until the film's almost over. And I think that represents the restraint the movie has in really feeling out how these people would react to it, and how his frustration builds over the movie, and how the audience's frustration builds. And the fact that you see that interview with Clara, and the questions she's being asked, you can see why both the adults in that room are asking those questions. And they almost, maybe to them, they seem like the right questions to be asking, but the audience, you know that they're getting the wrong person. And it's such a weird tone and such a weird thing to sustain, to make it somehow not just rage-inducing, but also incredibly tragic. It's
very tragic. And talking about Mads Mikkelsen and him never like outright denying it, it's like everything about his character's character is in that, and that's just not just a good performance from Mads Mikkelsen, but great writing and great like mise en scène. Because there aren't like outbursts in this film, because even though Mads Mikkelsen is like shunned from everywhere in town in every possible way, he like attempts to go on and lead his life.
Yeah, there's the most like skin crawling, like nerve wracking scene is when he goes to the church on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And he's already like covered in blood basically, because he just got the shit kicked out of him at the when he tried to go grocery shopping.
Yeah, he fucking headbutts a cat who like socked him.
Yeah. And like his like there's like blood in his nose, there's like a big gash in his forehead, and he walks in with a limp to church. And then while the children's choir, who includes Clara, is singing, he looks back at his old best friend and just like stares him down. Eventually there's a confrontation, and it is the most squirmy, like uncomfortable. I think the way I described it in the chat was it's like a cringe comedy, but there's never a punchline and it's never funny. It's always like the lead up where you're like, oh God, I don't want to like keep looking because I'm so uncomfortable. There's so many things that I just want to solve and I can't solve them because no one's acting the way that I want them to act, basically.
Right before that happens, when he like tries to clear his throat and starts kind of warbling with the hymn off key,
oh, God,
it's like,
so
Jesus
amazing.
Christ. And here's the thing, as chilling and, well, as squirm-inducing as all that is, the last 5 minutes of the movie, which I won't spoil, are chilling because it's so plausible that shit could happen.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I'm not going to spoil it. It's
a great ending. You shouldn't have it spoiled. You shouldn't read the synopsis or anything before you watch it. Just go in fresh because that ending is something else.
It's really weird for me that Thomas Vinterberg did Festen, was basically anonymous for a decade, and then just kind of went with, oh, here's a drama I did with Mads Mikkelsen. It's probably one of the best films of the decade.
Yeah.
It's like you can't call that kind. It's like you said, it's control. It's a very precise film. And that makes it sound like it's like this weird technical exercise, but no, this is very human. This is operating on a very human level. It's shot just so to look like an idol. And the idea is that idols can be poisoned by basically hearsay and hysteria.
Yeah. And hysteria that its conclusion is illogical and ridiculous, and not ridiculous, but it's illogical and like chilling and evil, but its beginning just makes sense. And it's almost hard to argue with how you even get there, because there's a point early on where the main teacher, I guess, of the kindergarten says to Mads, like, I believe the children. So that's why, like, I don't believe you. Like, don't talk to me. I believe the children. Which, like, how do you argue with that? How do you say, no, the children are wrong?
Yeah,
they're lying.
You can't be the guy who says, yo, kids lie.
Yeah. You can't be the guy who says, like, because the reason that Theo, Lucas's best friend, doesn't believe Lucas is because, like, my daughter doesn't lie. She doesn't lie. And, like, every parent says that, and every parent thinks that, and it's so eerily plausible and uncomfortable.
Yeah, from beat to beat, you can follow the logic to it, but when you, like, take the movie on a macro level, it's ghastly.
And I think that's why it works, because it's never hysterical. It never takes steps that don't make sense. And it is one of the most uncomfortable movies I've ever watched.
Yeah, it's up there, definitely. So The General, then.
The General is a comedy about a Confederate soldier, or not Confederate soldier, I guess, Confederate person who wants to be a soldier.
Sure.
Who does some shit on a train, to put it lightly.
Who does some shit on a train, yes.
It's basically like an hour-long train chase.
Yes. This has been cited by a bunch of people as like the first large-scale action movie. And yeah, I mean, there's been like larger-scale films with like set pieces and like depth of mise-en-scène that goes on for days and days and days. But just on a pure like action beat level, this might be ground zero. And
yeah, I mean, like the closest thing you could say is maybe like Griffith's Birth of a Nation, but even then the scenes where there's action are anonymous and they feel like very impersonal, whereas it's in the Die Hard mode almost, where there's one guy who's trying to solve a problem.
Yes, and that guy is Buster Keaton, who we've already spoken about in glowing terms in the previous episode.
But it should be said, this movie is even more death-defying than the fact that he didn't get run over by a fucking train is shocking to me.
Here's the thing that's fucked up. I acknowledge The General as being a great movie, but I still preferred Sherlock Jr. because Sherlock Jr. was like all killer, no filler. And this was 20 minutes longer and took away from the thing that Keaton does best, which is stunts.
I agree. I think this movie is the weaker film, and I think that it's because that stuff in the middle just doesn't work. There's romantic subplot of this is a lot more foregrounded, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work at all.
Nah, it's not, like we said before, this is not Keaton's strong suit. Doing like death-defying shit, jumping from train to train, clearing clearing train tracks without getting run over. Cannons are involved. Like, the shot of this film is like a train going bye-bye into a river.
Yeah. And then the second shot, one of my favorite bits in the movie is when he's riding on front of the train and he like has a log in his hand and he like literally throws it to get the other log out of the way of the train.
Yeah, he spears it.
And it's like, the fact that he remains stone-faced the entire time and doesn't look like he's terrified is astounding.
Yeah, because what if he missed?
If he misses, then fuck him. I guess he's dead. Like, maybe not like he'd really be seriously, seriously hurt if he messed up that stunt.
Yes.
And
it
just works.
At the very least, even if he gets out of the way, he still derails a whole goddamn train.
Yeah, which is not generally a good thing you want to do. That's
stuff that you want to avoid. I
think those gags work really well when they're happening.
Oh yeah.
The issue is, there's a big elephant in the room, which is that this is a movie where the Confederates are the heroes.
Sure.
And the happy ending is that our hero becomes a general in the Confederate army.
So Michelle, I know what I think, but what do Americans generally think about the Confederates?
Are you asking seriously or are you asking facetiously?
I'm asking you facetiously.
Us Yankees don't like them very much. Although the Southerners, they're not so quick to judge, I should say.
Man.
The Trump fans of the world maybe like your Confederate flag every once in a while, or all the time, and they think the South will rise again.
Oh man. See,
and the reason that it's like, that's almost because it's not really there's no political point the film is making.
No.
It's just the fact that it is a Confederate as the hero, but the fact that kind of upsets me more is that there's so many shots that are clearly stolen from Birth of a Nation, or clearly influenced by Birth of a Nation, the D.W. Griffith film, obviously.
That film,
the reason that the KKK exists now is so much part of the DNA of this film that it's really hard to separate the two.
Yeah, Griffith was a technically gifted filmmaker with some very dubious politics.
Yes. He's a filmmaker who made one of the most racist films ever made, but also then immediately afterwards made a movie called Intolerance that didn't address the fact that racial intolerance existed. He's a fucking weirdo.
Oh, man. D.W. Griffith.
Obviously, a lot of films owe their DNA to Griffith. Like, he was one of the first editors. Like, he was one of the first people that actually did editing proper, didn't just do linear, straightforward editing. Like, he's cut away to things. He had the iris edits. He had like all these different things going on. I don't need to tell everyone in the world why D.W. Griffith is important, but this film's so close to it and so mirrors it that it makes it not as fun to watch as it should be, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, you can try to, like, you can try to talk about things kind of independently of each other, but nothing really exists in a vacuum. And sometimes, like, we were, like, early on, I mean, when we did LA Confidential, it's like the shine comes off of stuff sometimes when the people involved get pinned for stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm. And so I think we've been pretty clear about the fact that that's something we've accepted. We're not trying to look at these films quote unquote objectively. Because I don't think there is an objective viewpoint, obviously. We're trying to look at them with the viewpoint we have, and the viewpoint we have knows that D.W. Griffith was a piece of shit, and the general shares a lot of blood with that.
Yeah, so I'm just running the numbers here. Birth of a Nation is 1915, and this is 1926. Mm-hmm. So it's still, like, within an earshot, you know? This is a relatively recent film. Like Birth of a Nation is still a relatively recent development in film history when The General comes out. So this is not like, oh, we're taking our cues from this, you know? It's not like Verhoeven plundering Triumph of the Will for parts, you know?
Yes. And at least Verhoeven had the common sense to, like, criticize those parts.
Yes, one of my favorite things, this is a bit of a tangent, but one of my favorite things about, you know, I fancy myself a film critic. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite things is when Starship Troopers came in 97, people thought it was a fascist film. Like, people who ostensibly are in the same line of work that I want to be in, presumably intelligent human beings with faculties for, like, deductive reasoning and, like, who know what, like, satire is, just were fooled or didn't know any better.
Yeah, and it's not a case of, like, I will go to bat for Showgirls as a satire, but that one, I can see why people misread it. Fucking Starship Troopers is so blatantly
It's so
satirical.
clear.
it's clearly mocking everything that the society in it stands for.
From the jump, the literal first scene is propaganda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's anyway. I mean, Starship Troopers is a masterpiece. You don't need me telling you.
Yeah, everyone watch Starship Troopers. It's wonderful, great movie. Don't watch the other sequels because they're never.
Oh man, you know what?
The sequels are made by people who thought that Starship Troopers was serious.
Yeah. One of the as yet unrecorded episodes of Stuck in the Middle with You is me subjecting one to Starship Troopers 3 Marauder because it has a 50% rating on it.
Oh God, is Busey still in that one?
I don't know if Busey's still in that one, but I think Van Dien's in.
Good for him.
So how are we doing for time?
I think it's time for us to figure out which of these movies is moving on.
I think
from the tenor of our discussion, it sounds like it's going to be The Hunt.
It feels like it should be The Hunt. Like on paper, I feel like it should be The General. But no, I think I agree. I think The Hunt's the better film.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think The Hunt doesn't have those dry spots The General does. I think that The Hunt knows more what it's trying to say and expresses that better. The General, it can't be argued. There's some incredible things in that film. 100% worth watching, obviously. But I just don't think it's if any Buster Keaton film is going to move forward, it'd be Sherlock Jr., and that's not moving forward, so...
Oh, man. Yeah, it lost to 3 idiots. Go back and listen to episode 5 for that one.
So, The Hunt.
Yeah. Yeah, General had a lot of actual, action stunt work, but there was a lot of emotional stunt work in The Hunt, if you will.
Okay. Cool. So then the question
is... who's that gonna face in the next round?
Yeah, it's going to be either Spirited Away by Miyazaki, as everyone knows, from Studio Ghibli.
Yes.
Or A Wednesday, which I'd never heard of before this, by Neeraj Pandey. It's a 2008 Indian thriller film.
Yeah, some further stats on our competitors. Spirited Away at 27, so a very, very, very high seed in this tournament.
I think I mentioned, I was looking up potentially the most acclaimed animated film of all time.
I would be willing to say yes.
Because it's, let me just look at some, here's just reading from Wikipedia. It made more money than Titanic in Japan. Won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. Won the Golden Bear. It tied with Bloody Sunday. It is in the top 10 of the British Film Institute's top 50 films for children under the age of 14. In 2016, it was voted the 4th best film of the 21st century. It was also named the 2nd best film of the 21st century by the New York Times. It is, people like this movie, I think I could say. It's
a good-ass movie. And, as for A Wednesday, it's the 230 seed, so a little lower in the bracket. Won the best debut film at the 56th National Film Awards, or the Indian Oscars, and pretty decently sized hit, not to the level of Spirited Away. $3.3 million box office on a $1.4 million budget. And shall we talk about, shall we laud Spirited Away even more than it already has by seemingly everybody on the face of the earth?
I think let's start with A Wednesday, because that way we can kind of, I don't want to say get it out of the way, but we can have, I have a feeling Spirited Away is going to move on, so we can have whatever time we need for A Wednesday, and if we don't have time for Spirited Away, the full discussion, we can always put that off till next round. So, A Wednesday, exclamation point, it's how it's stylized, is a thriller film about a police chief, or police commissioner rather, who is recounting his most memorable case in his whole career. And it's a case where one day a man claims to have planted bombs throughout the city of Mumbai, and that if the commissioner doesn't do what he wants, then he will blow them up, is the short version of it.
That's basically it. You had pointed out that this movie is basically Die Hard 3.
Yes.
And it is kind of Die Hard 3, except in Mumbai.
Yeah, and without Bruce Willis or Sam Jackson.
Exactly. I really love the opening, like how they set it up, where it's just this giant wide shot of an empty, the place where they have boats.
What? What are you talking? Oh, a harbor?
A harbor, thank you.
Jesus Christ.
It's a wide shot of an empty harbor.
Of an empty place they keep boats, yeah?
Yes. And he's just kind of sitting there, looking out into the open, and just reminiscing. I thought that was like a nice way to start off this film, which was completely atypical of the rest of the film, which kind of feels more standard issue action movie. And this kind of sets it up as something completely different.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say about this movie. It's a
perfectly decent action thriller.
Yeah, I think
it hits all the
films
beats.
We watched, the last 8 films we watched, this is the weakest, but that doesn't mean it's bad.
It's still pretty good. I mean, it's a fun time at the movies.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it hits all the beats.
Although the twist is weird.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna spoil the twist. If you want to watch the movie, just pause this and watch it. It's fine. It's a fine movie. It'll spend you an hour and 45 minutes. So
yeah.
Basically, the twist is that the person who has been planning all these things, who is planning the bombings, they think that he's trying to get a bunch of terrorists out of prison, but actually he just wanted them killed because he was really impacted by the 2006 Mumbai train bombing, which, for those who aren't aware, was a set of bombings that happened in India that 209 people were killed in, and over 700 people were injured. So very big terrorist attack. There's actually do you follow Lindsay Ellis on YouTube?
I do not. I should, but I don't.
She has a really good video actually on 9/11 films, and it's interesting because a lot of a lot of Indian films will use 9/11 as a stand-in for the Mumbai train bombings.
Interesting.
Like as a way to express their feelings about that without having to talk about that so quick after it happened. This is the only film that I know of that actually directly obviously I'm not an expert in Indian film, but this is the only movie that I've seen or heard about that talks directly about those. And basically the point of it is that a common man, as he is called, he's just like a regular guy who you never even learn his name, and they make a point of that you never learn his name. He just wants the police to do something more. He feels helpless, and he feels like this is the only way he has to not let that happen again.
Yeah, and the last maybe 20 minutes of this movie is him monologuing about this exact thing. And, like, I don't think this movie lands the plane. The twist happens. Nasir Rudin Shah monologues for like 20 minutes. He leaves, and the movie ends.
And one of the twists is there was never any other bombs. It was just a ploy to get these other terrorists killed. It's a weird message.
It's a weird message, and it's in a shell, which is basically an okay action.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing remarkable about this movie. It moves at a pretty lithe pace, but beyond that, there's nothing really remarkable about it other than the weird track it takes in the last 25 minutes.
Do you want to know my theory for why this movie ended up on the 250?
Please do.
So I think the reason that a lot of the Indian films that are on the 250 ended up there is because obviously there's a sizable population in India and they use IMDb as well. So basically like some of the most popular Indian films end up on the 250 just kind of like by stats, by having people to vote for it. And I think this film, by directly discussing the Mumbai bombings, is kind of like how when, like after 9/11, when we had the first films about 9/11, it took like a decade before people were willing to say, oh, those films kind of sucked. You know what I mean? Okay. Like, because it addresses something so tragic and it seems like it should be important, that it ends up getting more than it deserves in terms of credit, I'd say, if that makes sense.
That's fair. I mean, it's not super high on the list either. It's like barely in at 230.
Yeah, and that's why I think like it just like kind of pushed in there by number of by number of votes, not necessarily because it's a great movie.
Yeah, so like say 200,000 people putting it at like a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes the top 100 placement of Three Idiots even more like kind of mind-boggling to me. Not that it was a bad movie, but that is like a movie that is solidly entrenched in the top 100.
Yeah.
And it's another movie that's like 10 years old.
To be fair, I think that's a much better movie. And
I would agree.
And I think it's a movie that is slightly more tuned to the audience of IMDb. Like, I think even if you don't live in India, even if you aren't part of an Indian engineering school, most of the people who use IMDb regularly, like the power users, people who are actually putting movies into these lists, are going to be people in college, going to be people who are generally receiving some kind of higher education, are white for the most part, at least from America.
Sure.
And it's a relatable thing. Whereas this movie, I think, is very culturally specific. And I don't mean that negatively, obviously. It's just that for our American eyes, it's hard to see like what's the thing here. Because
the action thriller, I feel, is a concept that, like, you know, that it exports very well. And I think, I don't know, it may be just because this is not like I'm missing some kind of cultural context. But at the end of the day, all I see is an okay like police thriller.
I mean, I agree, but I mean, there must be something else there that we're not seeing. Because, I mean, it was a sleeper hit. People seem to love this movie. At least some people seem to love this movie. And there's something that is there that are affecting people.
Yeah,
I just don't quite see what it is. I think that maybe it's part of it's a twist. I think twists are, if you got a twist in your movie, you're a lot more likely to get on that 250.
Like, what would the equivalent? What would like another movie like this be that's on the bracket?
On the bracket? Nothing.
Yeah. Or what would be like an equivalent movie?
I mean, it's Die Hard, but Die Hard is such a better movie.
Is Die Hard 3 a better movie than this?
I like Die Hard 3 more than this movie, yes.
Okay. I haven't seen Die Hard 3.
But I mean, like, even the original Die Hard is on the 250. And
Well, because that movie fucking rules, and it's a fucking masterpiece. And I mean, here's the thing. It's like I had mentioned before. This movie does nothing exceptionally. It does nothing to rise above just being okay. Like, the characters, sure. The movie looks fine. The music is okay. I'm starting to buy into your theory that it's kind of the window dressing of the subject matter and like the cultural frame around just doesn't carry the weight that it would with an Indian audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that window dressing can do a lot for a movie sometimes, and we're making it sound like it's a bad movie. It's not. It's not. I think I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I enjoyed watching it, but at the same time, I wouldn't watch it again.
Probably not. But if it was on, I'd probably watch it.
So, we still got 10 minutes to talk about Spirited Away. So, I want to start with saying this is the first time I really got Spirited Away. I've seen the movie 3 times total. The first time I was probably in high school. Second time was actually last year. I saw it in theaters they did a brief re-release of it. And I saw it both those times with subtitles. And this time I saw it dubbed just because I wanted to be lazy and have to read the entire time. I want to say the dub's actually very good. Studio Ghibli generally gets pretty good dubs.
Sure.
But this is the first time it ever clicked with me.
I think I have a similar track record with Spirited Away because when I first saw it, I acknowledged that it was a beautiful piece of craft. It looked gorgeous. It moved along very nicely. It was fantastical in the way that I appreciate from Hayao Miyazaki. And that was the first couple of times. And this time, something turned where I was more emotionally attuned to it.
Yeah, I think if speaking for myself, the reason that it didn't work for me the first couple of times is that it doesn't function how most movies function emotionally. A lot of things happen that just kind of happen and don't, like, it's hard to track exactly where it is. There's no clear emotional arc to it. And the ending of the film is almost unsatisfying. But then this time watching it, I realized that's kind of the point of it, is to be a little bit unsatisfying. And the point, or at least for me, the point of it and what made it really like powerful was realizing that what I saw in it, at least, is that it's this movie about growing up. It's a movie about childhood. And she leaves behind, the protagonist leaves behind this magical Chihiro, or Sen, leaves behind this magical world, and it feels bittersweet and kind of painful, but she has to. And there's never going to be a full resolution for everything that happened there. And her childhood's just going to go. And there's certain things that happen there that aren't coming with her. Yeah,
there's the carrot they dangle where what's the young lad's name?
Haku.
There's that carrot they dangle where it's like, oh, one day I'll leave as well. And it's like, I'm not convinced you're leaving. But
yeah, and it almost seems like that's it. The first time I watched it, I was expecting a romantic turn from that. And it never happens. I think to the movie's credit, that never happens. It's a friendship, and it's a friendship that she realizes, I think, in the end, and what's sad about the ending, and that she realizes that she can't take these friends with her.
Yeah. And another interesting thing about this movie that kind of eschews convention and this particular strain of movie is that our antagonist is a bit more of a tweener than a full-fledged bad guy.
Yeah.
Like, what's her name?
Yubaba.
Yubaba is the antagonist, but isn't, like, she's not like Cruella de Vil or anything. She's, like, multifaceted. She has a literal doppelganger who shows up at not at the 11th hour, but, like, sort of later on. And she just comes off as someone who, like, oh, man, I gotta do this. I gotta run this fucking hotel, and all these fucking people asking me for work, and god damn it. And everything's a whole to-do, but she's not
evil.
She's got all the markers of it. She's got like the giant witch nose and the welt on the forehead, and has all the signifiers of evil, but is not evil. Rude as shit, and maybe not the best employer, but not evil.
I mean, that's one of the strengths of every, I think, Miyazaki film, or at least the ones that like really matter, and that I saw in Song of the Sea, which is an anime movie that came out in 2013, 2014, something like that.
Uh-huh.
And that their antagonists aren't really antagonists. They're stopping the hero from getting what they want, but they're not doing it because they hate the hero. They're not doing it because they have evil intentions. They're just doing it because this is something they do where it's there's a lot more complicated feelings there. And it makes it so like by the end Chihiro calls Yubaba Granny as she's leaving, like a term of endearment, even though she was the villain the whole movie. And she almost, like, the last thing she does to her, essentially, that Yubaba does to Chihiro is do this shitty, like, test where she's like, which of these pigs are your parents? And if you don't answer right, you have to live here forever.
Yeah, it's like 3-card Monty, except it's 12-pig Monty.
Yeah. And the actual red card's not even in there at all. But yeah, this was the first, like I said, this is the first time that I finally kind of understood what it was going for, and I finally felt it a lot more.
I think also what I got this time around is that the evolution in Chihiro's character was felt more foregrounded, because the first couple of times I watched this film, I think I neglected to put adequate weight in how she comported herself in the car ride to the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And she basically spends 2 acts like basically getting a personality, like building her personality. And like, I mean, I don't want to say developing a work ethic, but developing a sense of self and a sense of purpose and a sense of herself as a person who exists in the world and not as necessarily someone who's a dependent.
Yeah, and I think that also goes along with the fact that in the car, she's complaining about how she's leaving her friends. And then the final part of the movie is her leaving her friends. And just like, it's such a subtle way to like show that growth. Like, she doesn't come out and say, now I'm confident and I'm a self-possessed person and I don't feel the need to like feel awful about this. But the fact that she is able to do it and do it in a graceful way says a lot about what she learned when she was in the bathhouse.
Oh man, what a good fucking movie, Michelle.
Yeah, like, and honestly, going back, like when I started watching this for the podcast, I didn't think I would be as high on it. I thought that it would be like it was before, where I was like, this is a very good movie, but I don't really feel anything from it, and I don't kind of get what other people are seeing in it, and I think now I get it.
Yeah, I think this went from like 4 stars as like, beautiful piece of sort of fairy tale craft to like full-on masterpiece deserving of every laurel it's gotten.
So that's a long way of saying that this is going to beat out A Wednesday.
Yeah, sorry, A Wednesday. You did your best.
I would like to cite just real quick, if people are interested, a YouTuber named Big Joel did a video.
Shout out to Big Joel.
Did a video called it's something like ambivalence in Miyazaki's films or something like that. If you look up ambivalence Miyazaki, he did a really good video essay about a lot of the things we're talking about here. So.
Oh, right. So that's that.
Yeah. So next round, it's gonna be Spirited Away versus
The Hunt.
Yes, The Hunt. That's a weird matchup.
Oh boy. Yeah. I think there's a weird matchup here, and there will be plenty more weird matchups as we start filling in this bracket piece by piece. Next time, though, let me peek ahead at what we're going to be dealing with next time. So, for our next episode, which will be in 2 weeks, we will be taking a look at Once Upon a Time in America versus In the Name of the Father, and Paths of Glory versus The Passion of Joan of Arc. Holy moly. That's
a matchup.
Oh, boy. Oh, man. That's... and then if we start peeking ahead, I'm going to call this right now, because this is really interesting. The episode after that, which is going to be episode 8, we're doing 2 things that are really good.
Oh God, I just saw what you're about to say, and that's ridiculous.
We're doing Miyazaki again. We're going to do Raging Bull versus Howl's Moving Castle, and get a load of this. Schindler's List versus Winter Light, our first wildcard matchup against Schindler's goddamn List.
So it's up to
the 6th seed.
Basically, my job next, in episode 8, is to convince Derek to throw Schindler's List under the bus, which is not something I'm going to feel good about, but it's something that's going to have to happen.
Oh, man. But no, for next time, we will be taking a look at Once Upon a Time in America versus In the Name of the Father, and Paths of Glory versus Passion of Arc. It's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah. Until next time, where people find you, Derek?
They can find me on Twitter at Derek_G. And, yes.
Copy. And I'm on there at Space Jam Fan, and the podcast is at middlebrowpod.
And if you want to send us an email because you are a giant A Wednesday stan.
Seriously, if you happen to have some insight into why A Wednesday is this high up on the list and why people seem to like it so much, I would actually love to hear it.
Yes, same. Send that to middlebrowmadness@gmail.com. That's our very public email address. And I think that does it.
Yeah, that does it for today. 3 hours of recording later.
Oh, man. I still hate myself for not being the person who presses the record button.
Well, Derek, I have some advice for you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Have movies be jolly.
Oh, man.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.